Hi, it's Maddie, and welcome to the Krewe of Japan podcast, a weekly podcast where we take you on audio journeys through Japanese culture.
This time on Krewe of Japan podcast.
Welcome back to our podcast. Japanese pop music is a genre that has a very unique appeal to it, and it's garnered a good bit of exposure abroad thanks to its appearance in other pop culture media like movies and anime. But what makes J-pop so special? Why do people love it in Japan as well as around the world? Today, we sit down to discuss this with Patrick Michel, a Japan-based writer for the Japan Times and the Make Believe Melodies blog. Since Patrick's works tend to focus on Japanese music as well as pop culture as a whole, he definitely has his finger on the pulse of J-pop. So naturally, we thought he'd be the perfect guest to speak on current trends involving the Japanese music scene. Together with Patrick, we explore how to discover some of the top artists of the time.
So most notably, there's the duo Yoasobi. They are inescapable now. Their song Idol from last year, which was the theme for the anime Oshinoko. That won, obviously, the biggest hit of 2023 in Japan. But also, it was the first Japanese song to it was massive outside of Japan too. It topped some Billboard global chart, so it was the first Japanese song to ever do that.
The international appeal of J-pop.
Japanese artists are starting to tour internationally way more. In Asia, Yoasobi just sold out everything on their Asian tours, including in Seoul, which is impressive. You're going to see a lot more artists also trying to go to Europe and North America moving forward. So J-pop is becoming more global and open, which is great, because it used to be the absolute opposite.
Current trends in Japanese pop music.
A good approach too is also looking at especially Billboard's Japan Hot 100. YouTube's a good way to do that, or if you're clinging to the written word like Patrick is. They do it in English as well. The official Billboard website will do that weekly. That's a good way to also get a sense of what's very popular here.
And so much more. Get Apple Music or Spotify ready to queue up some potentially new artists as we dive into the Japanese pop music scene with writer Patrick Michel. Let's go!
Here's what's going on with Japan Society New Orleans. Be sure to check the show notes for links and more information. Here we go. On Wednesday, May 29th at 6:30 p.m., come join us for a happy hour at Nola Brewing and Pizza Company. Whether you're here to enjoy the pizza, the beer, or just good company, we look forward to seeing you there. Japan Society of New Orleans is also planning a social mixer scheduled for mid-June to come out and meet other members of the organization and share some news on upcoming events and programs. Date, time, and location are still TBD, but that's coming soon. For more information and details about these events and future events, follow us on the website and social media. Everything will be linked out in the show notes. Hope to see you there.
All right, listeners, I am in charge today. Doug could not be with us, but I have my girl Maddie here with me to assist. Hey, Maddie.
Hello, nice to see y'all, or speak to y'all. I guess the whole point is that you can't see.
I am very happy about this episode today because, Maddie, you actually came up with this episode idea, which I'm super excited about. I always wanted to do something about the Japanese music scene, but I always feel like I don't know enough. So I was like, I can never propose this idea because I know nothing. So thanks to Maddie for suggesting this. And she even came up with our special guest, Patrick St. Michel. Thank you for joining us today.
Yay!
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so Patrick writes for Japan Times, all things music related, and also he does his own blog. That's how Maddie discovered him. So we're really happy that you could join us today.
Well, yeah, I'm always happy to chat Japanese music. So, especially people who have read what I do. That's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, but before we get to that main topic, we have a tradition here on the podcast. Since we're New Orleans based, we like to ask our guests if you've ever been to New Orleans. And if you haven't, what are some things that if someone says New Orleans, you think of?
I have been to New Orleans once in my life. That was a very long time ago, back in university. What is that? That's almost 20 years now. So that's a real oh boy moment thinking about that. But when I was in college, I was going to a university in Chicago, And during maybe my freshman year, I forget exactly, that was the year of Hurricane Katrina. So they had organized for spring break. They wanted people to help clean things up in Louisiana. So we like drove down from Chicago down to Louisiana. And the first half of the trip was more near Lafayette. I don't know if our relief, quote unquote, was particularly useful, as I feel we were mostly moving like tree twigs out of people's farms. I guess that helped somebody, so that was all good. But we did eventually get down to New Orleans, and we spent 2 days there. A little bit of helping, and again, very small, like pick up a few things. But it was also a chance to walk around, see what the city looked like. My main memory of it is we ate beignets. That was like the culinary dive into the city, a city that is full of amazing food. Just like, give me the dessert, please.
Beignets are the best, though.
It was so good. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So my memory of it, it was obviously a very odd time for the city and state coming out of sort of a major disaster like that. But even then, I remember sort of people being in very good spirits, could feel kind of the atmosphere of the city. It wasn't like too riled up at the time, but it was nice. And like, I do really remember that time and enjoy it. My brief visit to New Orleans.
Now that we know, your relationship to New Orleans, which I think that's a great one. We've never had that before.
Oh, really?
So
Okay.
yeah, so that was a good one. So glad that you came down. Thank you for your relief.
Like
Anything was
19-year-old
helpful.
me, I guess. So.
Anything was helpful. But now we kind of want to know your Japan journey. What got you to love Japan and then Japanese music? And then, you got interest in Japanese music. So then, like, what made you click? I love Japanese music. Now I'm going to move to Japan and live and work there.
I think like a lot of kids who grew up in the 90s, I was just surrounded by Japanese pop culture. Not music specifically. Growing up, I didn't have a specific affinity for Japan. It was more like, I like Nintendo. I like Pokemon. What's Toonami on Cartoon Network after school? It was a lot of like kind of being exposed to that and just getting a general idea at first. And then over the years, I was always really into music growing up and very like the snobbish side of music, like reading Pitchfork when I was in high school. So one of those kids. But I would always check out like anything they recommended, and that led to a lot of music from Japan. Just that they were kind of saying like, "Oh, this is interesting." Things like Pizzicato 5, Cornelius, Boredoms for the noise rock people. So it was very like discombobulated, very much in that lane. So the funny thing is, the reason I moved to Japan was not for music. That was would end up being a happy accident. That was more existential dread because I was graduating university to take it back to college. I had studied journalism for 4 years. And so this was in the late 2000s. So that industry was already beginning its spiral downward, which we can get into later. But I kind of was just like, oh, I'm not sure I want to do this anymore. Like, what was I doing for the past 4 years of my life? Have I wasted everything? So I decided to take a break and I found the JET program and applied. And yeah, I got in and I thought, okay, I'll just do this for a year and like come back and then figure out my life. This will be like a nice break. So I was put in Mie Prefecture, right between Nagoya and Osaka. And I ended up staying there for 2 years. And I was in a very sleepy kind of suburb, kind of like a place a lot of people who commute to Osaka would just kind of live. It's called Nabari, nice city, biggest salamander center in all of Japan. Shout out. There were 12 salamanders there, which is a lot.
That is a lot.
You don't see that many salamanders at once. But there wasn't anything to do out there. So part of it was I started blogging for fun because that was the only entertainment I really had. I started my site Make Believe Melodies in 2009, which is the summer I came to Japan. It was literally just like, okay, I like music. I know a little bit about Japanese music, very little. Maybe I should try to learn more and share it just for fun. And I was very fortunate. I was very close to Osaka. It's like an hour train ride, basically. So on weekends, I could go to the city, go to CD stores, go to like random live shows, and just slowly but surely learn more about initially Japan's more indie music community, but also being exposed to a bunch of J-pop that, you never would have heard in America, and especially 2009. The big one being the group Perfume.
Yes.
I love them.
I do too.
So it's their fault I'm still here probably because
That's funny.
That
so
is
like
funny.
the first week I was in Mie, like again, not the most exciting place. I went to the local electronics store, a K's Denki, just to like walk around and be like, what's a Japanese electronics store like? This is how I'll keep myself entertained. And they were playing Perfume in the store. And I was just like, what is this? This is incredible. I've never heard anything like this before. And that was kind of the start of the rabbit hole of just being like, oh, cool. I want to learn as much about this as possible. So I was blogging. There were not too many people, especially at that time, writing about Japanese music in English. So eventually I was contacted by the then music editor at the Japan Times. His name is Sean McKenna. He's still there in a different role. And he was just like, hey, do you want to try writing? Do you want to do interviews or features for us? I said, sure, why not? And that's how it all started. I started getting more published in the Japan Times, and I was just like, oh, maybe I should stay longer and just see what happens. That was what, 2009, and I'm still here.
Wow.
Everything kind of just worked out. I moved to Osaka briefly for a weird 6 months, and then relocated to Tokyo, where I have been ever since.
What an incredible journey. That's so cool how they reached out to you.
Yeah, again, much like with you guys, I'm always happy when people just come out to me as like, hey, you want to do a cool thing? Like, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
very different from my experience. I remember coming out of college and wanting to write, and I would be like, hi, so I know all these things about Japan. Can I write for you?
That's the right approach, honestly. I should have eventually I would become more proactive of being like, hey, let me write for you. But yeah, at first I was just very much like, oh, I'm just living in the countryside, la 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 la, like going to electronic stores to learn about music that plays over the PA.
No, I love that though. When you hear a song on the PA and you're like, that's magic. What is that?
Right, and that was like, I mean, this was 2009, so sorry, listeners who will now hear the olden days. But it was like I was mostly like YouTube was still super primitive.
Yeah.
I was mostly finding things through MySpace. Like
Nice.
back then,
Yes.
it was just you would find a Japanese artist you like. You'd look at their top 8, their 8 friends, and then you would just start clicking those and seeing if they had music and seeing if it was interesting. And that was like what I would do. It's crazy to compare now since it's so
Back in the
like
day.
back in the day. Yeah, YouTube clips of Japanese music being 30 seconds long. I'm like, okay,
Oh, for
cool.
real? And like 280 resolution.
Yeah. This is the pinnacle.
Yeah.
You can kind of see them.
It's always so exciting though when you find little stuff in those
Exactly,
kinds of
yeah. And it
environments.
kind of like leads to these whole new worlds you didn't really know about before.
Yeah, exactly. So could you kind of help us like illuminate what kind of music is popular in Japan at the moment?
Sure. The past few years have been kind of I would say, like an epoch shift in Japanese music, especially in terms of big level J-pop. I'm actually curious with you guys, first off, what Japanese music do you like? Like, what are kind of the things you listen to at any time that you're like, oh, that's neat?
Oh man,
You're gonna date me if I reveal my secrets.
No. First off, it's your podcast, so I can't come in and start like throwing mud at everything.
you
All
have
in the
every
dark.
right. It's okay. It's okay. You might hate mine too.
No, there's no hate.
I
No,
mean, obviously, J-pop,
Mhm.
that's always a good thing. I mean, to date me, oh my god. So, sadly, Perfume was not my first discovery. It was my
Nothing wrong
second
with
discovery. My
that. Uh-huh.
first one was Utada.
All right, nice. Yeah, Utada's great.
I feel like a lot of people actually she was the first one. And then so I was really getting into music during that time. So I actually liked Visual K for a good bit of
Ah, okay,
time.
there we go. That's a ton of people's gateway. People, I mean, and I get it. It's this really like absorbing world, and there's not much like it in the
I
world.
know, right?
So, yeah.
So great. But yeah, J-pop mostly now.
Okay,
And then I just listen to music from back then.
that's fair. That's fair.
yeah, for me, I got sucked in deep by Johnny's Entertainment in like
Uh-huh.
middle school. That was like, y'all.
How do you find that middle? Is that like
I like you were talking about like MySpace and how you were finding music, and I was sitting here thinking like, how in God's name did I come across Johnny's Entertainment in middle school? I think it was like one of those YouTube things, like a recommended video or something, and I saw somebody's face, and I was like, that's the most beautiful face I've ever seen. Who is that? Like, what is that? Because, you know, the look is very different, and it was somebody from Cat Ton, if y'all are familiar with them.
I do.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, classic, right?
Yes, classic.
And I ended up being really into like Hey Say Jump and like all of that kind of stuff. And then I like hard shifted to AAA and kind of, if I'm being honest with you, like lost interest in pretty much everything else. And I was like heavy standing AAA for a long time.
They have some bangers.
They do have some bangers, and it was always my dream to see them live, but you know, times change and such is the way.
One of those sliding doors moments, you know.
Exactly.
Could I ever see AAA live?
I just loved how they were like multi-gendered, like how they brought that male-female kind of cool harmonies element, and like they go way too hard for their concerts, and I mean, who doesn't love that?
That's great to know, and I'll tie that in actually. So it's funny you mentioned that, because we're all kind of, it sounds like, you know, we came to Japanese music and entertainment generally the same time. Sounds like mostly 2000s, early 2010s. We're in that decade, right? The three of us. So everything's changed for the most part. There's, of course, like
a lot of... I can't even keep up anymore.
It's tough, because the biggest change that's happened is, you know, when the three of us were first discovering this, we had to find it through these kind of odd channels, right? It's like MySpace, YouTube clips. I know a lot of people who got into, for example, Johnny's artist through LiveJournal.
Oh my god, LiveJournal. I forgot about LiveJournal.
I did it through iTunes, honestly. I literally typed in J-pop in iTunes and I downloaded everything that came up.
I did that too at one point. Oh my god.
I didn't know how to do it. I was like, I need Japanese music in my life. This is how I'm going to do it.
So what's happened in the last few years is the Japanese music industry for a while was quite notorious for being like paranoid about the internet. Hence why so many YouTube videos for top-level J-pop acts were either quote-unquote short versions that were like 30 seconds long, or were just not available outside of Japan. There's a lot of control on the industry. But in the late 2010s, it started to loosen up. Spotify finally debuted here, and other subscription streaming services. And YouTube became even more central for younger people in Japan discovering music. And then the pandemic actually accelerated that. Once you couldn't have live shows anymore, people weren't going out to buy CDs.
Right.
Everything shifted to YouTube. And because of that, a new generation of artists kind of came up really quickly. And in the last few years have just become this really like inescapable new universe, if you will, of J-pop acts. The biggest thing that's happened is a generation of artists who kind of grew up with the singing synthesizer software Vocaloid. Most famous for being kind of the avatar for that is Hatsune Miku.
Yeah.
They've grown up and they've become like the stars of modern J-pop. So most notably, there's the duo Yoasobi. They are inescapable now. Their song Idol from last year, which was the theme for the anime Oshinoko, like that one, obviously the biggest hit of 2023 in Japan. But also it was the first Japanese song to like ever like it was massive outside of Japan too. It topped some Billboard global chart, so it was the first Japanese song to ever do that. So they're a great representative of that, because the producer of that group, his name's Ayase, he started out as a Vocaloid producer. So he was just a kid fiddling around with Hatsune Miku in his bedroom, creating music. And now that ethos and approach has become the standard in J-pop. Similar artists are like Otto, another singer who came up with Vocaloid, but she's more of a singer. There's groups like, they have a longer name, but I always forget it. They're shortened named as Zutamayo. They're really interesting. And Yoroshika. So these are bands where at least one of the members used to be a Vocaloid producer. And their songs are very short story-like. They're not always critical of modern life in Japan, but they're surprisingly dour, even sometimes lashing out at Japanese society. There was a very early period during the pandemic where like every big J-pop song was like angry and like depressed, because it was young people being like, I don't like what society is like anymore. Stop telling me to be like this. I'm going to be like this. And you still see that.
I love that.
Yeah, it's great. Otto is kind of the best example of that. She had a song called Usewa. It was her debut. And it's a real, like, I mean, the chorus, if you translate it, is literally just like, shut up. And it's basically like telling older people to shut up. It's great. Teachers got angry because like, students shouldn't learn this word. They'll tell me to shut up. And that's no good. So that's one corner of where J-pop is. But you're also seeing, and this is very domestic, though with a little bit of foreign spread. Over the past decade, of course, K-pop, Korean pop music, if anyone doesn't know what the K stands for, has become like really big, globally, of course. But in Japan's maybe the biggest market for K-pop, honestly, for all the attention it. Yeah, because it's
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, you'll see so many groups now, especially, have Japanese members. Fans here are very dedicated to K-pop groups. Obviously, lots of outfits have done well overseas as well, in the West, I should say. But here in Japan, it's a core market. Because of that, you have, we talked about a little bit, the traditional male idol powerhouse, the company formerly known as Johnny's and Associates.
Yeah, I saw they changed their name.
They're now, actually, I'm still not sure how to pronounce it. I think it's Starto.
Starto.
Yeah, you might want to double check the pronunciation, but
yeah.
Formerly known as Johnny's, they've dominated the market for a long time. But in recent years, you're seeing a lot of new projects and companies come up that are kind of inspired by K-pop, trying to take more of their sound and visual flair. One of the big noteworthy ones, we were talking about AAA earlier. AAA's rapper, Sky High.
Yeah.
He is really focused on sort of, like, he sees what K-pop has done and thinks J-pop should also be offering those same opportunities for performers. So he started his own company, BMSG, Be Myself Group.
Oh my god.
Yeah, he's trying to build the future of J-pop. And he's created a bunch of groups, kind of K-pop inspired, but trying to also separate itself from that. The most notable being called Be First. There's a colon in there somewhere, but it's hard to visualize a colon on an audio platform.
A little bit.
So, but he's doing that, and you're seeing this new wave of sort of K-pop inspired J-pop groups that are getting really popular here. You're seeing Korean companies actually even come in and do more to create Japan-centric groups. There's Nijiu, which is actually a girls group that was made through a reality TV show. They're by JYP, one of the big Korean companies. And then you also have JO1. It's all a series of letters and then a number. They're a Korean company working with a Japanese company to create this really big male project. That's the other side of things, is seeing how diverse male J-pop has become. 10 years ago, it was only Johnny's, right?
Yeah.
If you wanted to, like, sound, hello, fellow kids, if you wanted to stand a, like, male group, it was probably going to be a Johnny's group.
Yeah.
But today you have much more variety, and it's kind of created more healthy competition, I think. You're even seeing these formerly known as Johnny's groups try out new sounds and new looks and actually use the internet to keep pace, which is actually really healthy for the industry. It's good that they're no longer being like, nobody use YouTube, nobody go on Spotify.
Yeah, it's so restrictive and like curated, it seemed, back in the day.
Super controlling, but those days are fading away.
Very interesting.
Those are maybe the two big, like, developments. There's a bunch of micro things, but big picture, that's what you gotta know.
That's awesome. Very, very interesting. I don't know why, but I always had this visual in my head that like K-pop and J-pop are like two dragons like fighting each other, you know?
Well, the J-pop dragon would just never leave its mountain or whatever.
Right. That's so true.
They put a 30-second limit on it.
I know. Oh my god, that's so interesting.
That actually is another interesting change, which is during the 2010s, I think it definitely did feel like that. There was a lot of kind of
like rivalry.
Yeah. Like early on, you had a lot of people here, like older people being very like skittish about Korean artists performing on things like NHK or K-dramas being aired on TV. And like it would like sort of cross over into this weird geopolitical / xenophobic thing. Yeah, and then you would see, BTS takes off, for example, and it's kind of like, oh, why can't J-pop do that? So there was kind of this K-pop versus J-pop thing going on. But I do think in recent years, it's become much more collaborative. and there's way more intersections. Like K-pop does what it does very well,
Yeah.
but J-pop has done a great job of figuring out kind of its own sound and image recently. And that's especially true of artists like Yoasobi, Otto, a few other people like the singer-songwriter Fujikaze. And K-pop idols love this type of music. The biggest difference being J-pop is still very much rock-based, whereas K-pop is ultimately more dance pop and rap. It's taking more influence from that side of American music. But you're seeing like all these really great connections, like Japanese artists. This is actually another important thing happening, and maybe your listeners can look forward to it. Yeah. Japanese artists are starting to tour internationally way more.
Yes.
Thank God.
Yeah. So like in Asia, Yoasobi just like sold out everything on their Asian tours, including in Seoul, which is impressive.
Dang, that's awesome.
You're going to see a lot more artists also trying to go to Europe and North America moving forward. So J-pop is becoming more global and open, which is great because, yeah, it used to be the absolute opposite.
Oh my God. And like, what a beautiful segue into the next question, because
I tried.
You deliver. So J-pop obviously caters to the Japanese market, but like what factors do you think contribute to the international appeal, and like what has social media and anime and like music platforms like Spotify, like we mentioned before, like how has that kind of influenced the globalization of J-pop?
You hit on the biggest one, which is anime. That's been a real driver of the past few years.
Yeah.
We mentioned Idol by Yoasobi, which everyone should like pause the podcast and listen to quickly. And we're back. So that was the theme song to a super popular anime from last year. And you're seeing that a lot of Japanese songs that do well internationally are either the opening or ending theme for anime. Like, I think all the songs from Attack on Titan did really well on Spotify's various viral charts.
And that's awesome because they sound so crazy. Like, really.
That's the other important thing, I think. You know, it's great that if you're tied to an anime, that like, oh, people will be like, oh, this was on Jujutsu Kaisen, and I should listen to it. But I think what J-pop has done really well recently is it gives listeners something they can't find elsewhere. Again, to kind of be lazy on my part and bring it back to K-pop. K-pop's really good about reading what's happening in other markets. It sees what's happening in American music, and it's like, oh, we can do that with our artists and try to put them into that ecosystem. J-pop's very bad at that, but that's its strength because it ends up thinking of more unique alternatives. As mentioned kind of before, like rock is still really central to how J-pop sounds. And it's like, rock's just not as popular in America, you think, right? That's what music journalists say all the time, rock is dead. But like Japan doesn't care. They're just like, oh, we like this. And it ends up creating something that sounds unlike anything else.
That's probably like my favorite thing about J-pop is just how unique it can get and like how crazy they're willing to go with their sounds, you know?
Yeah. It's like even right now there's a song tied to an anime. I forgot the name of the anime. It's by the rap duo Creepy Nuts.
I know them. They're so weird, but good, but weird.
I have not heard of them, but I will be searching them after this is done.
They did a song that's for, I forget the name of the anime. I'm not a huge anime person, though I've had to force myself to learn a lot more the past 3 years.
Isn't it like that Muscle Magic anime?
Thank you. That's there is magic.
I know of it. Yeah.
But so the song they did for that was it Bling Bang Bang Boom or something? Yeah. So it's like Jersey Club, like this really like high BPM music that originates from Jersey, and it's like they just kind of like go all in on it in this really like over the top way. This style of music is famous for a sample of a chair squeaking, like kiki, but they just like overload on that sample. It's like nonstop squeaking. It's great, and it's like. Because if you were trying to market it, you'd be more tasteful with the squeaking. But they're just like, no, we just have to put as much squeaking as we can in the song.
That's amazing.
It was like the #1 viral song in the world for a little bit. That's a big part of it. And that leads to the third kind of important thing, which is because Japanese music is actually accessible on platforms like Spotify and TikTok and YouTube, people can actually listen to it and can actually interact with it. this is especially true with TikTok, where
Yeah.
the power of that platform is like you're ceding control of your art to the listener. I've given you the material, my song. You can remix it, you can dance to it, you can do your zany meme thing, your meme magic with it.
Meme magic.
And that's something that J-pop traditionally was never willing to do. They want to control everything. But once you give that over, people find the music and they're like, I love this and I want to do something with it. That's really helped propel Japanese music over the last few years.
Do you feel like there are any barriers to J-pop growing beyond its current level of popularity? Would it be the very fact that it is so unique is like, I don't know, the thing that both propels and keeps it where it is?
Well, I think that definitely, the way I always kind of imagine it is, I think Japanese music is kind of like, I find it hard to imagine a J-pop artist ever having like, I don't know, like a BTS Butter song.
Right.
For better or for worse.
Yeah.
But I also think you can develop a really strong fan base with what J-pop does. It'll never be something like, I mean, honestly, what limits it is, and this is something that I think about a lot as somebody who works in this industry, is like the media itself is still very kind of unsure how to cover any of this.
Ah.
And that almost is also something that's J-pop's fault too. J-pop is very good at creating its own unique music, and it's gotten much better at distributing it, but it's still not very good at promoting it. The way that journalism and media works here is drastically different, for the most part, than in America. And there are conflicts there. You know, there's still a big language barrier, and that throws a lot of mainstream media off. So Japanese music can always feel a little more niche than it actually is, just because it has, in recent times, gotten more attention. I mean, and honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, the biggest barrier might always be, and this is another kind of like, maybe we should just get over it, is like, a lot of people are just kind of like, oh, that's anime music, right?
Right.
There's a lot of people who are just like, ooh, anime, and that's kind of like a hard stop right there. But yeah, I think that's honestly kind of just not the right approach anymore. I feel we've reached a point where one, anime is like mainstream.
Yeah, never thought I'd live to see the day.
I know,
Yeah,
right? I've hit it for so long, like from classmates, and now it's like cool to
know.
watch anime. Like, what the heck?
Yeah, I was looking on Twitter the other day. It's like Goku is on Reese's Puff cereal boxes or something.
Stop.
Like, that's a true, like, what world are we living in now?
Where was that when I was 12? Come on.
Right. Like, I had to hide my Pokemon cards if I went to school because people would be like, what are you suck. But yeah, so that's totally different. And I think it's just a certain set of people who just don't, like, they kind of still see it as that traditional, like, ooh, anime world.
It's almost like hearing an American song and being like, oh, that's a sitcom song or something. Like,
It's just Seinfeld bass slap.
yeah, that's a Seinfeld song.
No, it's a banger, actually. But no, it is true, though. And that's how media works, right? It's like tons of songs get big because they're on a Netflix show.
Right.
I mean, Stranger Things, like, turns Kate Bush songs from 30 years ago into massive hits.
That was crazy, yeah.
That was very crazy. And, like, it's just kind of common now. And TikTok, too. And it's kind of similar because there is TikTok cringe, quote unquote, where it's like, I don't like this song because it was on TikTok. I was like, well, that doesn't really take away from the song. That's just, you don't like how people use it. So I do think that barrier is something that will always kind of hold J-pop back, just because there is kind of the classic otaku / weeb image of people who like Japan too much. I've been accused of being a weeb many a time by the fine randos on Twitter.
You are not alone.
This is our therapy session. But yeah. Like, I do think that's maybe the biggest challenge.
I feel like that too. When you think of J-pop music, you do think of anime. But there's also another thing I think of when I think of J-pop music, and that's just the vibe of the fans. I feel like it's just such fan-oriented because, like, online, like on YouTube, you see the thrilling atmosphere and, like, the audience at concerts in Japan with the famous rhythmic glow sticks and, all that fun stuff. So, like, how would you describe the J-pop fans? Like, what makes the culture around J-pop music so unique? Is that the type of fandom that's just unique to J-pop artists, or does it, like, spread to other genres as well?
Dedicated would be the word that comes to mind immediately.
Dedicated.
Like, I mean, because it is, when you go into the worlds of like these top level like idol groups for the most part, whether it's a male group or a female group, especially, I mean, they're not as prevalent anymore, but AKB48 being a golden example back in the 2010s, like so much organization, right? Besides like learning chants and sort of moves for the live show, like you said, it's a lot of coordinated glow stick thrusting and screaming at the right parts in the song. There's also organizing, like, let's buy CDs to help our favorite group do well. Let's buy a billboard or one of those little trucks that drives around Shibuya, and we can do a birthday message for our favorite member. It's that connection between idol and fan that's really special to J-pop. I'd say that's very fundamental to J-pop. It's since kind of spread. You know, I think K-pop was clearly inspired by things like Johnny's.
Right.
The guy who founded SM Entertainment says as much. I'm not blowing the lid off anything.
Yeah.
But it's like they've seen how that works, and that fan culture has bubbled up there too. And you're seeing it now in the States too. I mean, like, not to date when we're recording this, but like today in Japan, Taylor Swift just landed to do her shows here. And it's like, oh, when I think of fandom, I think of Swifties. And I'm just like, oh, that's not that far off from like Arashi fans, honestly. Less glow stick coordination, I think.
Unclear, actually.
Well, we'll find out this week in Tokyo Dome. But I do think that's part of it, is that dedication and real, like, people devote themselves. Devotion's the other word. People will devote themselves to their favorites. And it is almost like kind of hobby isn't even the right word for it. It's like outside of work, outside of school, this is a thing that they love. And that culture has also extended to, you know, it's common in Visual K. It's common with certain rock groups and certain like non-idol performers. It's very common actually now with another area of Japanese pop culture I am fascinated by, virtual YouTubers.
Interesting. Yes. I've been hearing more about this.
Oh yeah, this is another, and it has a lot of intersection with music because most of them end up making pop. But if you see them live and like it's very Hatsune Miku-ish, and then it's a projection performing against the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but the fans are every bit as just connected. They got the glow sticks, they've got the chants, they've got their merch. So dedication and devotion is what really makes it special. And just seeing how fans support it, I think is very unique here and remains so.
I feel like I almost took on some of those qualities as like an overseas fan. You know, like, especially like back in the Johnny's days, as I call them now, for myself personally, I feel like it became, it's almost like I was taking cues. Yeah, granted I was in middle school, you know, but I was like somehow taking cues from like the way the Japanese fans were acting and like these concerts I was seeing, you know, and like the live journals that keep up with their whole lives, you know, it's crazy. Just so involved.
What's the most like, what's the right word? To show your fandom, what's the most extreme thing you've done?
Oh, I mean, I've written birthday letters. I did
there
do
we
that.
Go, okay.
Yeah. And like I you know, Google searched my little address of like the entertainment business and like sent it over. I had a friend help me translate from English to Japanese. Nice. Yeah, it was pretty involved. I mean, for an overseas fan, I'd say.
Well, yeah, that's the dedication. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love to see. Yeah.
Yeah. But to kind of switch gears a little bit, for people wanting to get more familiar with Japanese music or maybe just like dive deeper if they're already into it, how would you suggest they go about finding new artists?
Oh, good question. I mean, this is a problem every music fan faces now, right? It's like things are so readily available through streaming or sites like Bandcamp. You then get this sort of analysis paralysis where it's like, there's too much choice. What do I do? Right. You don't know where to start, especially when you're bringing in another culture, another language. It can be very much like, what's happening here? I think the best ways to start, like in general, is there are very dedicated Japanese music fan communities still out there. And I do find that those sort of gatherings of like really smart and dedicated fans is the best way to get an in. So, for example, if you like J-pop, kind of these very, we're talking about B First or the current generation of Johnnies, you can find plenty of fan communities on Twitter that sort of talk about them and like basically are their PR where they will update you about every single thing the group is doing. It's very easy to find fan accounts and just get a sense of that. If you want to kind of go in different directions, whether it's rock or Japanese rap, there's more like niche places to go. A good place I recommend if you want to like find more eclectic, we'll say, Japanese music is rateyourmusic.com, which can be a very like a little bit of a nerdy place. But you'll find lots of people there who have created really dedicated lists of like, these are the 500 most important Japanese albums of all time, in my opinion. And it's like, that's a great entryway, a classic list that's kind of like, this is what you should know. And then you just go from there. As much flack as subscription streaming gets for how it treats artists, I will say Spotify does a really good job.
I think so too. I think I have to
too.
agree with you on that one.
Yeah, that's my go-to.
I want to be like, rah, rah, fight capitalism. But, and I'm like, oh, well, no, it's pretty good, actually.
I mean, I don't like that they don't have Stones on there, but I feel like that's a more of an industry issue, not a Spotify issue, because I feel like their agent is probably just not releasing their music, which is so sad.
I'll be cryptic and say I'm sure that will change in the near future.
I sure hope so.
I feel all of these sort of Johnny's acts are slowly getting there. So
I'm waiting. I mean, Snowman's not on there. Stones isn't on there. It's just a sad world without them too on Spotify. I'm just saying.
You got they changed the name. You got Conjohnny 8, now Super 8. So you can go kind of back in time. To be specific for listeners who want a good kind of example of Spotify's curation doing very well, I wrote about this last year, and I just continue to find it fascinating. Spotify made a playlist called Gacha Pop. So gacha, like the toys in Japan, the little capsule vending
I
machines.
just came across that playlist a few days ago.
I love it because it is a very clever approach, because it's a playlist that understands how Japanese music travels in the world today. Again, something like K-pop is very coordinated. You have dedicated fans working together to get their artist's attention. J-pop, for the most part, and Japanese music in general, is discovered randomly. This song was on an anime I liked. This city pop song from 1978 got big on TikTok, or YouTube told me to listen to it, or just like random artists suddenly getting attention. Gacha Pop understands this, and as the name implies, it just takes all of these very different sounding Japanese artists, and it's just like, put it on shuffle, see what you get, see what you like. And this is Japanese music. And I would recommend that because it's a really good overview of kind of what's trending in Japanese music right now. You get things we've talked about before, like Yoasobi or Utada or Otto, but you also get lots of indie stuff, like stuff that's way kind of like not remotely mainstream here, like in Japan or elsewhere. There's artists like, some good recommendations, like Harune Muri is this really good rock artist who has gotten some attention abroad. Or the math rock band Jocho is on here. Like, there's a bunch of Vocaloid, there's rap. Like, I'm going over it, I'm just like, musically, there's no through line, but that's why it's great. So I'd recommend that for people who really don't know where to start. It's kind of just like, jump into this playlist, as it implies, see what you like, and then keep searching from there.
Yeah, I feel like for people who already kind of are into the Japanese music scene and like you've already created your playlist on Spotify or whatever, if you're on your phone and you scroll down from your playlist, if you've played it enough times, and I know this because it did it to me, it'll start suggesting songs for you to add to your playlist that you haven't heard of before.
I do kind of find streaming sites like that. Apple Music has similar things as well. Those are both very good ways. Once you find something you like, see if it's on YouTube, and then just, I guess, hope the algorithm figured you out, and then go from there. So,
at the very least.
I mean, typically for YouTube, I kind of figure out like what's the top 10 most popular Japanese songs of this month, and I kind of track it that way to figure out like if anything new has come out that I haven't, heard of yet.
That's a good approach too, is also looking at, especially Billboard's Japan Hot 100.
Yeah, that's exactly what I look at.
YouTube's a good way to do that, or if you're clinging to the written word like Patrick is. They do it in English as well. The official Billboard website will do that weekly. That's a good way to also get a sense of what's very popular here. Well, there is a chart called the Oricon chart, which is kind of the traditional domestic ranking. For a long time, it only counted physical sales, which by like 2019 is pretty outdated,
Yeah.
even in Japan. So they've updated a bit, but it's still kind of not that reflective. I find Billboard way better. So if you're listening, ignore Oricon, look at Billboard.
Okay, what is your favorite thing about Japanese music? And who are your favorite artists? Now we turn the tables back on you.
Oh no, I'm in the spotlight. It is similar to what I think makes Japanese music special. I respect that Japanese music is mostly out of step with the rest of the world. And because of that, people develop much more interesting angles on music. Like whether it's J-pop or whether it's, a good example of something I've really liked recently is in America right now, and maybe the Western world in general, there's this newfound interest from younger listeners in this sub-style of rock called shoegaze. So this is very like feedback heavy rock
kind
music.
of psychedelic sounding.
Yeah. It's like the vocals are kind of buried.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. There's bands, hey kids, Google these, like My Bloody Valentine or Slow Dive. These are groups from the early 90s that were really big. And Gen Z, apparently, according to the internet, is really into this now. So you get, in America, a lot of bands that I feel are trying to put their spin on it, but you're also kind of like, yeah, I remember that. I heard this in high school too. Like, that's great, but also, what I respect about Japan is here, there's a new wave of artists who are doing that sound, this really like feedback drenched rock, but they're using Vocaloid as the vocal component.
Okay.
And it's great. Like, I love that they're using like Hatsune Miku, but under 10 layers of guitar.
I love that.
Yeah. And it's like, I don't think people who are trying to be like reverent of this style outside of it would think to do that necessarily. But here it's just kind of like, oh, why not? Like, we have Hatsune Miku. She's our My Bloody Valentine. It's stuff like that, surprises and clever twists on it that kind of keep me coming back and like still very much engaged. I guess that does reflect in some of my favorite artists. We already mentioned Perfume, who is definitely like, if I hadn't heard their music in that electronic store back in 2009, who knows what I would be doing. But they're a great example. Their sound continues to evolve, but even back then it was very much
unique.
It's still just like clever use of vocal manipulation, like auto-tune and other filters. This really like at times claustrophobic electro sound that I love. It's great. I love things that sound like robots trying to become humans, which is why I also like Vocaloid.
Love that.
And then who else is good recently? An artist that I've liked for a while that has gone through a lot of changes, but still reflects kind of this clever angle on contemporary sounds that somebody trying to be more global maybe wouldn't pick up on, is an artist called Wednesday Campanella. Japanese, it's Yoasobi no Campanella, which is actually how you'll mostly encounter them here. But they're really good. They do a lot of interesting takes on modern dance music, but give it this pop edge. The lyrics are very weird because it's mostly them singing about like historical figures. They had a really big viral song on TikTok. Was it 2 years ago, I think, called Edison, which is like about the inventor Edison, but it's also about like streaming service. It's very high concept.
Highly relatable, yes, of course.
Very, of course. I recommend them. They're fantastic. And the producer of that group has actually become prevalent all over modern J-pop, a guy named Kenmochi Hidefumi. He produces for a lot of VTubers or young singer-songwriter types. So that's one to check out. And then, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I'll do one more, just because, why not? One of the things I love about Japanese music too is it's easy to create a community, whether that's in person, like in Tokyo, it's easy to find a club or a bar. And that's kind of where you create your own community and your own sound with your friends or like-minded artists. Or the internet, which there's so many electronic artists who came together out of like message boards or like Nichan, the message board that is mostly about who knows what even at this point. But like-minded creators could come together and create their own online spaces where they could just create their own musical worlds. And I love that. I love this ability for people to do that and then just take a little bit of everything they like. Maybe they like EDM, but they also like anime and they also like guitar solos. And they can combine all three of those into whatever they want. And they have the freedom to do that because of the internet. Last year, an artist that really exemplifies this is a group of producers called Pastasta, all caps, PAS space TASTA, kind of like pasta, but with some extra letters. They put out an album last year called Good Pop, which is indeed very good pop. And I highly recommend that. That was my favorite album of 2023. But it also is a really great snapshot of a lot of different elements of Japanese music right now. There's rap, there's like singer-songwriter folk stuff, there's weird like cloud rap, big air quotes around that. Great album to get a sense of all the weird mutations that play out in a city like Tokyo and how they can all come together to create something special.
Very cool. Pastasta.
Check them out.
I think those are good recommendations for people who are trying to discover newish sounds to J-pop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And that's a big part of it too, is today. I find especially when you go a level down from mainstream J-pop, like there's way more collaboration among these more kind of like fledgling scenes. That Pastasta album has a lot of guests on it, and it's so easy on Spotify, for example. Shout out Spotify. Like, just click the artist and see what they've done, and then sort of see what ecosystem they're part of, and then you're just discovering all these pockets of Japanese music that aren't easy to pick up on, but are just rich and really fun.
Spotify is just bringing all the good stuff. I mean, it's it's so true that it's unprecedentedly easy to just like go in and go down the rabbit hole. You know, it's like you're not stuck in this niche anymore. You can just jump between all the niches, and
that would be my other advice. And this is honestly true of all music, not just Japanese music. Like, don't rely too much on algorithms.
Right.
I think that's where a lot of people start getting down on Spotify as a discovery platform. Is it's just kind of like they see it as like, oh, they're feeding me the same thing over and over again. But the truth is, if you put in a little effort, not even that much, you can find lots of great stuff just by clicking around on playlists, just searching randomly. Another good thing to do, actually, and I do this with a lot of non-Japanese countries, Spotify has their daily viral charts section.
Yes, I found so much music this way.
And it's great for Japan because it shows you what, like, it really gives you a varied look at what people are listening to. Yeah. Like, for any country, honestly, you'll learn so much about what's happening there, but also what kind of globally connects everything. So
right, because there'll be like random songs from the US on those charts, or like from, you know, probably Korea as well, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, I'm gonna click it right now and see what's on there. I'm curious. I need to do my weekly check, but that's a great way to do it too. Right now, it's the number one song is, I believe, from Eastern Europe.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a great way to learn a lot of more niche stuff and sort of find way more like jumping off points. So
well, this was super informative. That's all I gotta say.
Thank you for letting me babble about Japanese music.
Anytime. I wish I could babble more about Japanese music. So I guess we'll conclude now, give you a little opportunity to pitch anything you might want to talk about, any fun projects coming up.
Oh gosh, what is my fun projects coming up? Same old right now. Just the best way to follow me is either on Twitter. You can find me at MB Melodies, or go to my blog, which is mbmelodies.substack.com at the moment. It's jumped around platforms over the years, but yeah, check that out. I didn't want to say this. That's another good way to find new Japanese music. Not a big self-flex person, but hey, let's try it.
Hey,
I mean, it's
when
worth
you got
a
it, you
mention.
got it. Like,
Yeah.
And yeah, check out the Japan Times music section. I'm quite regularly there. So,
well, that's awesome. So we'll put all of those links in our description of the episode, so that way our listeners can easily access all of your social media and publications.
thank you.
We had such a fun time talking with you about Japanese music. I know Maddie is super stoked to be back for this episode. So, we really appreciate you coming on to
thank you so much for having me. It was fun.
I know, it's so exciting. So we would love to have you back on in the future if we need to do some kind of other music episode, if you're willing to.
Just let me know and I'll be there.
Awesome.
When we talk about music, I can do it. So
Let's do it.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And that's it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for tuning into the Krewe of Japan podcast. A big thank you to Patrick Michel for joining us today to share his boundless insight into the Japanese pop music scene. We'll have a link to his Japan Times work and his Substack in the show notes. Check it out. Also check out all of our music-related episodes in the podcast back catalog. We've sat down with city pop idol Yu Hayami to discuss city pop, Jerome White Jr., aka Jiro, to discuss his lasting impact in the world of enka, and YouTuber and musician Noram Nakamura to discuss the world of shamisen. It'll all be linked out in the show notes. Who's your favorite Japanese artist? Share with us on Instagram, Facebook, X/Twitter, TikTok, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, or YouTube at KREWEOFJAPAN Krewe of Japan Podcast. While you're there, give us a comment, follow, like, retweet, share, whatever floats your boat. Let us know how you're enjoying the podcast. Or perhaps you prefer to provide your feedback in a more private setting. Send us an email at kreweofjapanpodcast@gmail.com. We'd really love to hear from you. Speaking of feedback, if you're enjoying what you're listening to, please feel free to leave a 5-star rating and/or review on your favorite podcast streaming app. Every one of those 5-star ratings and reviews helps others interested in Japan and this kind of content find the podcast. Or hey, maybe just let a friend know about us. I'm 100% sincere when I say that any and all support is incredibly appreciated. But that's it for today. Until next time!
Looking to start your own podcast and don't know what platform to use? Tell me about it. When we started the Krewe of Japan podcast, we tried a bunch of the big name recording platforms, but always came back to the one we're still currently using to this day, Zencastr. Zencastr is now the all-in-one solution making podcasting easy. In addition to its high audio and video quality for podcast production, Zencastr provides a full suite of production tools to record, produce, and publish studio quality content from the comfort of your home. Just log in through your browser and start recording. It's that simple. For us, we simply send out links to our guests and they join the lobby. But before you know it, it's all done and you have your studio quality audio and up to 4K video right there ready for you, right when you finish. The best part is having their multi-layered backups to ensure that your recordings are in the highest quality, regardless of anyone's internet connection stability. With Zencastr's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcasts in one place and distribute to all the major destinations. It's really that easy. Go to zencastr.com/pricing and use our code Krewe of Japan, KREWEOFJAPAN, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. We want you to have the same easy experiences we do for all of our podcasting and content needs. It's your time to share your story.